Smoke has been seen over Rafah in southern Gaza ahead of a planned full-scale Israeli assault on the area. The country's military said it had been conducting a limited operation in Rafah to kill fighters and dismantle infrastructure used by Hamas. Yesterday, Israeli forces seized the main border crossing between Gaza and Egypt in Rafah, where more than 1 million displaced Palestinians have sought shelter during Israel's 7-month-old offensive. Now, this cut off a vital route for aid into the tiny enclave where hundreds of thousands of people are homeless and hungry. And against the backdrop of this, International Relations Minister Dr Naledi Pandor delivered the Shireen Akleh lecture at the University of Johannesburg. Let's speak to SABC News International editor Sophie Mokoena, who joins us live now. Sophie, thank you so much for your time. I mean, Dr Naledi Pandor delivering that lecture at UJ and had a strong focus on the media. What are her views on how the Gaza story is covered?
Well, particularly on the backdrop of Israel's decision to ban Al Jazeera, the minister spoke about how the whole world, particularly the powerful nations who often talk about democracy, how they didn't even say anything about that decision, and saying that this speaks to Israel's intention to ensure that people don't know what is happening as they engage in this heavy-handed military operation in Rafah. She also pointed out that because the lecture was around the Palestinian journalist who was killed, Shireen, she spoke about how, if she was alive, she could have been reporting about the developments in Palestine at this moment. Her saying that the sad thing is that if this decision by Israel to ban Al Jazeera was something that was done to, for example, in South Africa, to the SABC, the whole world will be up in arms. Let's take a listen at what the minister had to say about Shireen.
Efforts to intimidate and assassinate members of the media should not be allowed to continue with impunity. I wonder of us gathered here, how many know the names of the 97 who have been murdered? If Shireen were alive today, she would have been in the trenches in Gaza, reporting day and night on the atrocities taking place, in the hope that the world would take notice and show their solidarity with the Palestinian people. She would have been devastated by the wholesale destruction of civilian life in Gaza and the unfathomable global intolerance of the unending suffering of the Palestinian people, many of whom have died agonizing deaths trapped under the rubble. She would have been reporting on the immense suffering of survivors in Gaza who are now battling unprecedented hunger and starvation, as well as continuous military assaults by the occupying forces. Regrettably, despite the ruling by the highest court of the United Nations, the International Court of Justice, the Israeli state has continued its murderous assault on the people of Gaza with impunity, killing more civilians, maiming thousands of others, continuing the bombing of homes and other buildings and infrastructure, affecting every possible avenue of life of the residents of Gaza.
And Sophie, she also touched on the latest in Gaza, particularly when it comes to those disturbing reports that kept on cropping up about the discovery of mass graves. Any views on what she says must happen?
Let's bring it home. We are talking about the building, the collapsed building in George. You see how people are tense, how people are emotional. This is just one building. You can imagine in Gaza, different sites and people buried under rubble. And as they go on with their daily lives, trying to check after the attacks, then they discover these mass graves. And the minister said that the international community must call for an independent investigation. And clearly, if this is proven to be correct, as we can see the bodies when they are being taken out under rubble, and also those in mass graves. This is a clear war crime, and therefore the minister saying that the world cannot look away when this issue is happening, and calling on the organs, particularly of the United Nations, to ensure that there's an independent investigation so that those who are responsible can take responsibility and be held accountable.
And of course, I mean, she also speaks about that issue on the recent attacks that are directed at the ICC, sharing her own experiences in relation to this kind of pressures that she's also been suffering as well since this particular story started developing again.
You know that she has been under pressure, particularly from the developed North countries, the allies of Israel. You know that the Congress in the United States of America, some congressmen and women have been very critical and putting pressure, even calling on the Biden administration to impose some harsh measures against South Africa, and her also been targeted in these whole attempts to ensure that South Africa doesn't continue with this International Court of Justice matter that is before the ICJ, and that will be heard in months to come. She pointed out that when you look at the pressure that's being meted against the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, after there were reports that the ICC is intending to deliver that warrant of arrest against the Prime Minister of Israel. She pointed out that this is something that the world must not allow, and also her saying that the International Criminal Court must be allowed to do its work. Let's take a listen.
Concrete criminal prohibition on starvation is set out in the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. Starvation of civilians is defined as a war crime under the ICC's jurisdiction, and they have to investigate and prosecute. Imagine 1 million signatures to the ICC saying we are waiting for you to prosecute. The Rome Statute definition of starvation is intentionally using starvation of civilians as a method of warfare by depriving them of objects indispensable to their survival, including willfully impeding relief supplies. So, in conclusion, in memory of Shireen Abu Akleh, we all continue to call on the ICC to prosecute these war crimes and to issue arrest warrants for those leaders in Israel who have ordered and presided over these crimes. The slowness to investigate and prosecute those responsible for these war crimes necessitates greater mobilization among the youth and civil society around the globe.
All right. Of course, Sophie, as a final question then, let's talk about the situation in Rafah. Of course, a lot of concern about what we could likely see, especially if a full-scale offensive is to be launched.
When you listen to the UN Secretary General, clearly it is going to be a humanitarian catastrophe, because this is a densely populated area. This is a refugee camp. There's no place to hide. And you see Israel launching these attacks at night. As we speak, if you were to look at Reuters feed, live camera beaming in the border of Rafah and Israel, you'll see that at night, that's where these attacks are being launched. And you also have military cars on the ground, and they have nowhere to go. And that is why the UN Secretary General, the World Health Organization, DG, and many, many agencies of the United Nations have raised concern. And later today, Shawan Bryce-Pease compiled a report that looked at what is happening in terms of the latest in Rafah. It is going to be shocking.
And one can only imagine also the panic that is again now on the ground as people don't know where to go. So we'll certainly look forward to that report there by Shireen. And these are live visuals there as Sophie was talking about that border there. As you can see, of course, it's night time and a number of people are wondering if they're going to be seeing more of the same, especially when it comes to some of the attacks. And right now, as you're even hearing, that there may just be a full-scale attack. One doesn't even know when does it come. And at the same time, Hamas saying that it is ready when it comes to accepting those particular ceasefire negotiations, but at the same time, Israel still then saying that there are still some kind of, agreements that they're waiting for them, the basic requirements there. So we'll continue to monitor this particular story. That was Sophie Mokoena, the SABC News International Editor.